Hi, my name is Jacob Zhu, and the topic I chose is if playing sports helps students do better in school or make it harder to succeed academically. I chose this topic because I've been a varsity student athlete through all my years in DHS, and there's often a stigma that athletes are less focused on academics or underperform in the classroom. So I wanted to bring clarity to that assumption by examining the relationship between athletics and academic performance through real data. But before we can dive into whether student athletes perform better academically, it's important to understand why and how sports might impact learning in the first place. And one reason is that physical activity is proven to boost brain function and cognitive performance. It increases blood flow and oxygen to the brain, which enhances the growth of new brain cells, a process known as neurogenesis. And on the top right, you can see brain scans from a study by Charles Hillman, and the scan on the left shows the brain after 20 minutes of sitting quietly, while the one on the right shows the brain just after 20 minutes of walking. And the red areas reflect increased brain activity, showing how even light exercise can stimulate the brain and help improve focus, memory, and learning. And below that is just a diagram that shows how physical activity and fitness contribute to better overall health, which in turn supports stronger academic performance. So this chart is based on a study from the Northwest Missouri State University, where they surveyed 193 high school students, and 95 of them were student athletes and 98 were not involved in sports. And the goal is to see if there is a difference in academic performance between these two groups. And according to the data, there is. And student athletes have an average GPA of 3.56, while non-athletes had a slightly lower average of 3.4. And the median GPA was also higher for athletes at 3.75 compared to 3.5 for non-athletes. And they even broke it down even further with the standard deviation, which tells us how spread out the grades were, and which was lower for athletes, meaning that their academic performance was more consistent. And both groups had a maximum GPA of 4.0, but the lowest GPA for athletes was 1.8, while non-athletes dropped to 1.1. So not only are athletes performing slightly better overall, but they also seem to have fewer academic outliers struggling at the bottom. And this helps challenge the stereotype that student athletes are less focused on school. Even with packed schedules, practices, and games, they're still showing up academically. Now let's talk about let's look at how student athletes compared to non-athletes when it comes to graduating from college. If we look at the federal graduation rate, or FGR, it might seem like non-athletes do slightly better. The FGR for the student body is 70%, while for student athletes it's at 68%. So at first glance, it might look like athletes are growing at a lower rate, but that's not the entire full story because the FGR has limitations such as only counting students who graduate from the same school they started at. And if a student athlete transfers to another school and graduates from there, the FGR still counts them as non-graduate. And that's a big deal because transfers are pretty common in college sports. And to fix that, the NCAA created the Graduation Success Rate, or GSR, which includes athletes who transfer and still graduate, and as well as mid-year enrollees and others the federal rate misses, which basically gives us a much more accurate picture of how athletes are doing academically. And when we look at the GSR, it results with actually 91% of student athletes graduating within 6 years. So yes, if you look at 1 year statistic, it might seem like athletes underperform, but when you consider more complete and fair data, it's clear that student athletes often do just as well, and in many cases, even better than non-athletes academically. So after going through all this, I think that answer is very clear. Playing sports doesn't hurt your grades. If anything, it can actually help. And personally, I think a lot of it just comes down to time management. As student athletes, we're kind of forced to build routines, balancing school, practices, and games. It teaches you how to manage your time, set goals, and stay disciplined. And I think that those habits naturally carry over into academics. So even if someone hasn't seen all the data and charts, the connection on how athletes do perform better really just makes sense. And that's about it. Thanks for watching.